Congressional Black Caucus Foundation has spawned a generation of leaders who have made valuable contributions to our communities. And in that tradition, 3 years ago, a new chapter began in the story of the foundation with the election of Congressman Kendrick Meek as chairman of the board. Meek follows in the footsteps of those whose vision and leadership helped establish the CBCF as the premier organization affecting positive change in communities. His can-do attitude, inclusive style of leadership, and decision-making ushered in new opportunities for the foundation and reinvigorated the organization. Retreats and planning meetings provided avenues for the CBC members, board members, the Corporate Advisory Council, the CBC spouses, and staff to shape the vision and direction of the foundation for years to come. From these sessions, a pragmatic long-term strategy emerged that would lay the groundwork for unprecedented accomplishments over the next 3 years. The foundation knew it was imperative to build upon existing CBCF programs, such as health and housing fairs, that fulfill vital needs within our communities. And projects such as A Voice helped capture and preserve the rich history of political and legislative contributions of Blacks for future generations. Helping young people receive the opportunities, knowledge, and experience they need to succeed and become leaders in business and government has always been one of the core missions of the foundation. Growing up, Kendrick Meek was fortunate to watch his mother, former Congresswoman Carrie Meek, shatter glass ceilings in Florida politics and learned early on the value of making early investments in our future leaders. In his first year as chairman, he was proud to announce the historic $1 million partnership with Walmart that would increase the number of scholarships and expand internships beyond the CBC member offices, allowing students to gain invaluable experience in congressional leadership offices and the executive branch. Since he became chair, CBCF has paid off its mortgage, making it one of the few African-American nonprofit organizations to own a building in downtown Washington, D.C. The annual legislative conference is the foundation's signature event and fundraiser and attracts thousands of attendees. Chairman Meek has worked hard to strengthen the advancements made in recent years by doubling the efforts to provide an educational and enjoyable experience to all its valued supporters. Under his leadership, close to $33 million has been raised. The founding fathers of the CBCF envisioned a prolific organization that would stimulate growth and equity in Black communities. And more than 3 decades later, the foundation continues to fulfill its mission. While one chapter may come to a close, the election of the first African-American president and the promise of future leaders means the foundation continues to be uniquely positioned to address the challenges and opportunities facing our community and our nation.
Good evening. Thank you so very much for being here this evening, and I want to thank Dr. Scott, our President and CEO, and the Board of Directors, our Corporate Advisory Council, the staff, volunteers, and all of you in this room for that outstanding tribute. It's been a great pleasure leading this great institution, the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. I came here along with when my mother was elected in 1992, I came here as a state trooper and then moved on in 1994, coming here as a member of the state legislature. And I want to thank my mother for having such fortitude and such integrity to represent the state of Florida and allow me to follow in her footsteps, not only serve in Congress, but serve this great institution, the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. Mom, I really appreciate you, and please give my mother a round of applause. Congresswoman Carrie Meek from the great state of Florida. I could not do the work that I have done over the last 4 years at the foundation as chair without the help of my wife, who's been very, very supportive. She served in my first 2 years as the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Spouses, my wife, Judge Leslie Meek. Please stand up. Thank you. Thank you so very much. I believe that the Board of Directors and also all of the team at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, you have a lot to be proud of. The fact that you've increased internships on Capitol Hill, not only in the 42 offices of the members of the Congressional Black Caucus, but at the Pentagon, at the White House, at the Defense Department, in many State Department, and many other great institutions and great agencies here in the federal government. You're allowing young people to be able to add to their vita that they worked on the Judiciary Committee with the great John Conyers and many others. The last point that I will make here, and as it relates to reflecting on the work that has been done, that it's up to us to keep the spirit of this foundation alive, to be able to allow opportunities for those that have never dreamt that they would have a chance to come to this town and to serve with so many great members of Congress. There are people that are in our programs at the foundation. Their mother and their father are just everyday people. They go to work every day. They don't know any elected officials. They go onto the website. They fill out an application. And many of them are chosen to come to Washington, D.C. for the first time. And it's because of your support of this foundation over the years and the good support of so many new friends that we have now that have gotten involved in the work that we have been doing for a number of years, for 39 years. Those individuals are better because we are willing to hold the ladder to allow them to climb up. We are willing and have done away with the crab barrel effect that many have said. We do not allow others to climb up so that they can achieve. So I ask you, as we continue to move on into our 40th anniversary next year, please double your commitment to this foundation, not only in spirit, but also in heart and in mind. I want to thank you for allowing me to serve. I want to thank the members of the Congressional Black Caucus for allowing me to serve as a young member within my second, third, and now fourth term in this great position that many wait years to serve in. Thank you so very much, and God bless you, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
So congratulations to Congressman Meek. And I know that his beloved mother, who we so adore, Carrie Meek, where are you? Did I get? Yeah? There you are. How are you? We love you. Okay.
It goes without saying that the success of institutions and organizations, whether big or small, rests largely on the influence and capacity of its board of directors.
The Congressional Black Caucus Foundation has assembled a body of talented, respected, hardworking, devoted men and women representing a broad cross-section of industries and professions. This annual conference, in concert with a myriad of other stellar events and initiatives, is the byproduct of their federated support and commitment to future generations.
Let's meet these luminaries.
But I'm going to move the teleprompter first.
President Dr. Elsie L. Scott, President and CEO, Congressional Black Caucus Foundation.
Vice Chair, Ms. Kimberly A. Williams, GlaxoSmithKline. GlaxoSmithKline.
Secretary, Mr. Virgil Griffin, The Boeing Company.
Treasurer, Mr. Elliott Hall, Dykema.
Assistant Treasurer, Ms. Kimberly A. Woodard, Walmart Stores Incorporated.
And Ms. Donna Brazil, Brazil and Associates.
Mr. Kevin Brown, Dell Incorporated.
Mr. Chaka T. Burgess, Amgen Incorporated.
The Honorable G.K. Butterfield, U.S. House of Representatives.
The Honorable Yvette D. Clarke, U.S. House of Representatives.
And from Brooklyn, the Honorable...
Brooklyn, when Brooklyn's in the house,
That's right.
they always have to give themselves a shout out.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Harlem never does that. Why does Brooklyn do that?
Because that's what makes it Brooklyn.
Okay, the BK, okay.
The Honorable Danny Davis, U.S. House of Representatives.
And Mr. Michael Drain, AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals.
Mr. Eric V. Eves, Citigroup Incorporated.
Mr. Dwayne Farmington, State Farm Insurance Company.
Mr. Darrell B. Hazel, Ford Motor Company.
And Mr. Frederick Humphreys, Jr., Microsoft Corporation.
Ms. Ingrid Saunders Jones, The Coca-Cola Company.
The Honorable Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick, U.S. House of Representatives.
The Honorable Sheila Jackson Lee, U.S. House of Representatives.
The Honorable John Lewis, U.S. House of Representatives.
Mr. Robert M. McGlotton, McGlotton and Jarvis.
Mr. Lewis McKinney, Jr., Anheuser-Busch Companies. The very first, I have to say, the very first, our angel supporter of the National Cares Mentoring Movement, along with my beloved board member, Johnny Furr. Thank you.
Mr. Marcus Sebastian Mason, the Madison Group, LLC.
The Honorable Gregory Meeks, U.S. House of Representatives.
Ms. Kim Wilson, General Mills.
The Honorable Donald M. Payne, U.S. House of Representatives.
The Honorable Bobby L. Rush, U.S. House of Representatives.
And Ms. Sharon C. Taylor, Prudential.
Mr. T. Daniel Turno, Heineken, USA.
Mr. Yelburton Watkins, Office of the House Majority Whip, Congressman James E. Clyburn.
The Honorable Melvin Watt, U.S. House of Representatives.
And Mr. Howard Woolley, Verizon Wireless.
CBCF General Counsel, Ms. Amy Robertson Goldson.
And now the ex officio members. CBC Chairperson, the Honorable Barbara Lee, U.S. House of Representatives.
Corporate Advisory Council Chairperson, Ms. Marie Long, AT&T.
And now, CBC Spouses Chairperson, Mrs. Simone Marie Meeks, the New York Academy of Medicine.
Director Emeritus, the Honorable Cardis Collins, and the Chairman of the Board of Directors, the Honorable Kendrick B. Meek, U.S. House of Representatives. Please give the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Board of Directors a round of applause.
Welcome once again to the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's annual legislative conference. I am both honored and humbled to stand before you as the 21st chair of the esteemed Congressional Black Caucus. 42 remarkable men and women devoted to the American promise and the over 40 million Americans who afford us the privilege of serving as their voices and advocates for democracy. As one of the most influential caucuses in Congress, we have left our fingerprints on an assembly of legislation designed to balance the scales of justice, abolish the pervasiveness of poverty, and promote the ringing of freedom for all Americans. But our work is far from done. It is just commencing. Many have classified this period as the post-racial era for America. Despite the unimaginable triumph of President Barack Obama serving as the 44th President of the United States of America, 44th President of the United States of America, 44th President, our nation is still working on its promise to overcome. Presently, 24% of African Americans in this country are living in poverty, African Americans represent 12% of the United States population and account for half of the new AIDS infections. 250,000 African Americans are unemployed, and 3 out of 4 African Americans are uninsured or underinsured. Therefore, the relevance of the Congressional Black Caucus is renewed, and we are resolute in our role as the conscience of the Congress. We appeal to each of you to help us reinvest and rebuild the fabric of our society, community by community, family by family, hand in hand. Thank you again for your presence. Thank you for the support exhibited during the conference, and thank you in advance for your noble commitment to the work of the CBC and the CBCF Foundation. Thank you. Nine months ago, on a frost-covered day, feet planted on the slave-chiseled steps of our nation's Capitol building, America witnessed the dawning of a new era, ascending from the bellies of ships to marching for accommodations from the back of the bus to the head of the country. It was this generation that was called to change and advance the movement from the margins to the mainstream, from being perpendicular to parallel. It was destined for this generation to audaciously elect President Barack Obama, the 44th President of the United States of America. His matriculation to the Oval Office has been portrayed on the pages of bestsellers, captured in poetic speeches, and masterfully manipulated to encourage children to dream without barriers.
President Obama has tackled many issues that's facing this country. He inherited many issues, but he has taken the lead and leadership in bringing about change here in Washington, D.C. Many of us in Congress stand with the President as he moves forth in dealing with financial issues, everyday issues that are dealing with everyday Americans. With the First Lady, Michelle Obama, who has brought a new flavor to this country. And being an outstanding First Lady and traveling the world as the First Lady. To their children that has brought youth to the White House, and a mother-in-law that everyone loves in America. This amazing family has set the tone for change. Our president, who has said that he is determined to be the last president that has to deal with the issue of health care and will bring about change and health care to the people of this great country. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the 44th President of the United States and the First Lady, Michelle Obama.
They didn't want me to be on the right. This is CBC. To all the outstanding guests here tonight, to our outstanding chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Barbara Lee, please give her a big round of applause. To her outstanding foundation chair, Kendrick Meek, please give them a round of applause. Majority Leader Steny Hoyer is in the House. The House Majority Whip, James Clyburn's in the House. Chairman of the DCCC, Chris Van Hollen, is in the House. And my great friend and the chair of the DNC, Tim Kaine. Please give him a big round of applause, Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. I want to begin by congratulating all of the recipients of the Phoenix Award for outstanding contributions to American life. I have to single out one of tonight's honorees for whom I can personally vouch, our ambassador to the United Nations, Susan Rice. Susan is doing a fantastic job as ambassador, especially this past week when we were at the United Nations. And we are all lucky, all of America is lucky to have her representing us there. So please give her a big round of applause. I look out at all of you tonight, on members of Congress, on state and local officials, on leaders of all kinds, and I am reminded of the extraordinary acts of public service being rendered by African Americans today. I'm reminded of the difference each of you is making at every level of government, in the quiet neighborhoods of our small towns, in the bustling streets of our big cities. But I'm also reminded that it wasn't always this way. I'm reminded of a time long before the CBC was formed, long before the civil rights movement was sparked, when just a lone African American was serving in the United States Congress, a North Carolinian by birth, the child, some say, of slaves. George Henry White was the last of that first generation of African Americans elected to Congress in the aftermath of Appomattox. But at the end of the 1800s, when a segregationist Supreme Court handed down separate but equal, with African Americans being purged from the voter rolls, with strange fruit growing on the poplar trees, White decided against seeking re-election, meaning that once again, neither the House nor the Senate would be occupied by a single African-American member. And at the end of an inspiring farewell address, the gentleman from North Carolina said, "This, Mr. Chairman, is perhaps the Negro's temporary farewell to the American Congress. But let me say, Phoenix-like, he will rise up someday and come again." Members of the CBC, all of you gathered here today, tonight is a fulfillment of that prophecy. While George Henry White might not have foreseen the exact details of Montgomery and Selma, while he might not have foreseen the precise outlines of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act and all the struggles to come, he knew that someday African Americans would sit in our city halls and state houses. He knew that someday the halls of Congress would be walked by representatives and senators of every creed and color. He knew, as Frederick Douglass knew, as Harriet Tubman knew, as Martin Luther King Jr. knew, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. More than a century has passed since Congressman White left Congress. In that time, we have faced a number of difficult tests and bitter trials, as a people and as a nation. There have been dangers to peace and security. There have been barriers to justice and equality. There have been threats to opportunity. So we are by no means the first generation of Americans to be tested, but tested we have been. Most recently, we've been tested by an economic crisis unlike any that we've seen since the Great Depression. Now, I have to say that some folks seem to have forgotten just how bad things were when I took office. They seem to be exercising some selective memory. So let's just take a stroll down memory lane. Our economy was shedding 700,000 jobs every single month, more than the entire population of Baltimore losing work every month. Credit had dried up. Loans for everything from college to cars were nearly impossible to come by. Our entire financial system was poised on the brink of collapse, with many fearing that what has been called the Great Recession would become another Great Depression. You remember that. That's why we acted boldly. That's why we acted swiftly to put in place a Recovery Act that was passed with the help of members of Congress here tonight, and that's being carried out with the help from governors and mayors here tonight. And as a consequence of those early actions, we're cutting taxes for 95% of working families. Not for the rich folks, but for ordinary folks, putting some money in their pockets. We're extending and increasing unemployment insurance for 12 million Americans to help them weather this economic storm. We are making COBRA 65% cheaper so Americans don't lose their health care coverage if they're out there looking for work. We are saving the jobs of teachers and police officers that Americans rely on all across the nation. And we're putting Americans to work, rebuilding our crumbling roads and bridges, and schools and waterways, with the largest investment in our infrastructure since the interstate highway system was built in the 1950s. Because of the action we've taken so far, we have stopped the bleeding in our economy. So the next time some of these folks come up asking you what the Recovery Act has done, you tell them it has prevented us from going into a much worse place. That much we know. That's been confirmed. But we also know that we've got a long way to go, that the progress we've made has been uneven, and that this recession has hit communities of color with particular ferocity. Today, more than 1 in 7 African Americans are out of work, the highest in nearly a quarter of a century. More than 2 out of 10 African Americans and 3 out of 10 black children are living in poverty. So this economic crisis has made the problems in the communities of color much worse. But we all know that these problems have been there for a long time. Communities were struggling to catch up long before this economic storm came ashore. One study that looked at trends in this country over the past few decades found that while roughly 7 out of every 10 middle-class white children end up surpassing their parents' income, roughly 7 out of every 10 middle-class black children do not. Think about that. For the majority of some Americans, upward mobility. For the majority of others, stagnation, or even downward mobility. That was taking place over the last decade, before the economic crisis. That kind of inequality is unacceptable in the United States of America. Now, bringing hope and opportunity to places where they're in short supply, that's not easy. It will take a focused and sustained effort to eradicate the structural inequalities in our communities. Structural inequalities that make it difficult for children of color to make a success of their lives, no matter how smart or how driven or how talented they are. That's why we're launching Promise Neighborhoods, to build on Jeffrey Canada's success in Harlem with a comprehensive approach to ending poverty by giving people the tools they need to pull themselves up. That's why I've created an Office of Urban Affairs, to lift up our cities with a coordinated strategy to unleash their potential. That's why my administration, under the leadership of Attorney General Eric Holder, is serious about enforcing our civil rights laws and tearing down barriers to equal opportunity. But of all the barriers still standing in 2009, few are more unjust, few are more entrenched, few are more inhumane than the barriers to a healthy life and a good education. Barriers that constrain the dreams not only of African Americans, but of all Americans. Barriers that can and must and shall be overcome. For the sake of every American living today and for the sake of every American yet to be born, we must bring about a better health care system in this country. Not in 10 years, not in 5 years, not in 1 year, this year. I know there are voices out there telling us we're moving too fast when it comes to health insurance reform. They're telling us to slow down. They're telling us to wait. How are we supposed to tell Americans like Easter Spencer to wait? This is a woman who discovered a lump in her breast back in June and was told it would be 6 months before she was eligible for health insurance that would cover the cost of removing it. We're telling her to wait? How are we supposed to tell Americans like Nathan Wilkes to wait? There's a man whose health insurance came with a cap, so when the claims started piling up because he had a sick child, he was left to frantically search for another option or face $10,000 of out-of-pocket costs. Let me tell you, we have been waiting for health reform since the days of Teddy Roosevelt. We've been waiting since the days of Harry Truman. We've been waiting since Johnson and Nixon and Clinton. We cannot wait any longer. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over. There comes a time to remember the fierce urgency of right now. Now's the time to enact health insurance reform in the United States of America. Now's the time to offer stability and security to Americans who have insurance. Now's the time to make it affordable for those who don't have health insurance. Now's the time to slow the growth of health care costs for our families and business, our government. That's the kind of reform that we need. Now is the time. And that's what so many members of Congress here tonight and all across the country are working so hard to produce. Now, many of you are probably familiar with our plan, but I just want to go over a few things so you know what to tell your friends and neighbors and folks in the community who ask about it, because they may be seeing some misinformation. Just a little bit. You know, I was up at the G20, just a little aside, I was up in the G20 and some of you saw there's big flags and all the world leaders come in and Michelle and I are shaking hands with them. And one of the leaders, I won't mention who it was, he comes up to me, we take the picture, we go behind, and he says, Barack, explain to me this health care debate. He says, we don't understand it. You're trying to make sure everybody has health care and they're putting a Hitler mustache on you. That doesn't make sense to me. Explain that to me. He didn't understand. So let me just clarify. If you already have health insurance, under the plan we've developed, you will not, I repeat, you will not have to change your coverage or your doctor. We are not requiring those changes in this legislation. What we will do is make insurance work better for everybody. It will be against the law for insurance companies to deny you coverage because of a pre-existing condition. It will be against the law for insurance companies to drop your coverage when you get sick or water it down when you need it the most. They won't be able to place some arbitrary cap on how much coverage you can receive in a given year or a lifetime. We will place a limit on how much you can be charged for out-of-pocket expenses, because in the United States of America, nobody should go broke because they got sick. We will make it easier to identify health care disparities and work to close them. That's long overdue. And insurance companies will be required to cover at no extra charge routine checkups and preventive care like mammograms and colonoscopies. There's no reason we shouldn't be catching diseases like breast cancer before they get worse. That makes sense. It saves money. It saves lives. That's what we're going to do. So that's what we do for the folks with health insurance. And we'll finally offer the tens of millions of Americans who don't have health insurance some affordable choices. We'll do this with a new insurance exchange, a marketplace where individuals and small businessmen can shop for affordable health insurance plans that work for them as one big group. So they'll have leverage to get a better deal than they get right now, a much better deal. And that is going to save them money. Now, there are going to be some who claim that, well, this is a government takeover of health care. There are going to be some who suggest that they're going to lose their choices. We are talking about expanding choices, and I just want everybody to remember that they said the same thing when we tried to pass Social Security. They called FDR all kinds of things that we cannot repeat here today. They said the same thing about Lyndon Johnson when we tried to pass Medicare. They are saying the same things now, trying the same tactics, but we are going to get this done this year thanks to members of the CBC and members of Congress all across the country. And thanks to you at the grassroots level that are going to stand up and insist that we cannot afford to wait any longer. Now, the key to progress for all Americans is not just healthy bodies, it's also a well-educated mind. And we know that the African American community will fall behind in the United States, and the United States will fall behind in the world unless we do a far better job than we've been doing of educating our sons and daughters. Unless we close the achievement gap that sees black students and brown students lag behind their white classmates year after year, decade after decade. Unless we reach all the students who are dropping out of school and giving up on their future. Today, almost a third of students drop out of high school. A third. And a disproportionate number of them are African American or Hispanic. That's not just a loss for the African American community or the Hispanic community, that's a loss for all Americans. That's the future workforce in the 21st century, when a good education is a prerequisite for success. When the jobs of tomorrow require a bachelor's degree or more, when the countries that out-educate us today will outcompete us tomorrow, we need the talents, the energy, the contributions of all our children, not just some. We need to prepare every child in America to compete with any worker in the world. Now, there are a number of things government can do to offer our kids a 21st century education. It can increase Pell Grants and Perkins loans and simplify financial aid forms. It can establish better standards and assessments in our schools. It can reward teachers who are doing a great job and move bad ones out of the classroom. It can improve quality in early learning initiatives. It can rebuild our crumbling schools. It can offer all our children a complete and competitive education, from cradle to classroom, from college through a career. That's what government can do. That's what government must do, and that's exactly what we've begun to do here in Washington, across this country. But I've said it before, and I know I may sound like a broken record, but I'm going to say it again. Government alone cannot get our children to the promised land. Government can't put away the PlayStation. Government can't put our kids to bed at a reasonable hour. Government can't attend those parent-teacher conferences. Government can't read a book to your child at night. Government can't help them with their homework. Government can't make sure they leave to school on time. These are things only a mother can do and a father can do. These are things that a parent can do. We need to accept our responsibilities as parents and community leaders. We need to be good role models and encourage excellence in all our children, every last one of them. We need to let them know there are no excuses for not doing your best every day, all the time, in order to achieve your dreams. We've got to push our kids to aim higher. I don't want all our kids aspiring to be ballers or rappers. I want them aspiring to be teachers and doctors and scientists and engineers. I want them aspiring to be members of Congress and Supreme Court justices. I want them aspiring to be the President of the United States of America. I want them to have their sights set high. No excuses for mediocrity. If they come home with a B, don't tell them that's great. I know some of y'all do that. Tell them to work harder and get an A. Set their heights high. A world-class education, affordable quality health insurance, jobs and opportunity, all of us accepting responsibility for ourselves and our children and our common future. That's how we'll make life better for the African American community and thereby make life better for the larger American community. That is how we will build a new foundation for our economy that yields lasting shared prosperity. That's how we'll take up the cause of freedom and justice and equality in our time, just as earlier generations of Americans took it up in theirs. Remember what it was like for George Henry White in the early days of the 20th century, as he was bidding farewell to the House of Representatives, the last African American to serve there for a quarter century. Remember the taunts and the threats and the attacks braved by White, braved by Lewis, braved by Chisholm. Remember all they did, all so many others did, to make it possible for us to be here tonight, to make it possible for you to be here tonight, to make it possible for me to be here tonight, because I know that if we can act as they did, with the same sense of unity, the same sense of possibility, the same determination, the same sense of purpose, then we will not only help America's peoples live healthier lives, we won't just help America's children live out their dreams, but it will be said of us, as it was said of our forebears, that when the need was great and the moment was hard, when the odds seemed against us, we did our part to perfect our union. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
the incomparable Danny Glover. Danny Glover. Danny Glover, a man amongst men, a commanding figure on stage, on film, and in life, an audaciously outspoken activist, a fearless ambassador for the underserved, unabashedly provocative while pragmatic in every depiction. Of course, he's dubbed the Dean of African American Actors. Danny Glover lends gravity and complexity to a diverse cast of roles while manipulating artistic expression as a platform to articulate the richness of the African American experience. He's a Hollywood icon, a humanitarian across the globe, and a trusted ally of the Congressional Black Caucus. Let us bring forward now our brother, Mr. Danny Glover. Danny Glover, on behalf of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, we present to you tonight this beautiful Phoenix Award. Thank you so much. Give Mr. Glover a round of applause. The Phoenix Award presented to Danny Glover by the Foundation. You want me to take it back?
I certainly want to thank the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation for bestowing this award on me, and also the awards for the other recipients as well. Paul Robeson once said that each generation makes his own history, and that generation is judged and defined by the history it makes. When I first attended the activities sponsored by the Congressional Black Caucus in 1987, the center of focus and controversy was the struggle to impose sanctions on the South African apartheid government. Nelson Mandela was still in prison. The South African machinery of tyranny and repression seemed interminable. And there stood the CBC with its determined, defiant will, through its collective democratic voice and power, fighting to impose those sanctions. And the rest is history. Strategically and historically, we, African Americans, and our struggle for justice has been at the moral center of this nation's consciousness. From slavery to its abolition, through the subsequent years of discrimination, the civil rights movement, and beyond, we have given new and imaginative vision to this word, democracy. What does this word mean to us individually and collectively in the 21st century? How is it used not simply as a mechanism to vote, but as a force that changes the material consequences of the millions of this planet's citizens who live in abject poverty and structural inequity? New democratic ideals in this hemisphere are now challenging existing paradigms and defining new horizons for peaceful stability and cooperation in the region. Within their borders, new voices and organizational structures within the political process are determined to effect sustainable change. And at the forefront are not only indigenous people, but also African descendants. The civil rights movement played a significant role in attracting the rest of the world to see America has the potential to be an ever qualitatively evolving democracy, which led to "We Shall Overcome" being adopted by all kinds of freedom struggles as a kind of freedom anthem for the world. At this moment of global ethical crisis manifested in the economic crisis, we once again need the kind of bold, visionary, transformative leadership from African American citizens and leaders. On the national front, and my intention certainly is not to upstage the president, we need leadership to educate the American people and to enlarge democracy by passing the health care bill with protection from the greed of insurance companies. We need bold leadership from all of you across the country and your local and national civic organizations and local and national elected leadership to ensure that the greed and corruption from banks and corporations that has been so evident and widespread in recent years is banished by protective laws as the economy stabilizes. We need bold leadership from all of you to address the racialized criminal justice laws and economy that has shut away 2 million mostly Black and Latino citizens. And on the global front, we need the Black community and Black political leadership to once again help galvanize our country's vision of what America and the world can be as a new expression of democracy by taking on the challenges of global issues like climate change, the normalization of relationships with Cuba. I'm very disappointed that Ricardo Alarcón, the president of the Cuban National Assembly, was not given a visa to attend this celebration here tonight. Again, we also need a just peace for Israelis and Palestinians, a guarantee of the Palestinians' humanity in a sovereign, self-determined homeland, support for Afro-descendants in Latin America in general in advance of national democracies and development, and in particular, we must assume our responsibility for ensuring that the American government works with Afro-Colombians and the Afro-Garifino peoples of Honduras to gain full access to national resources and political participation. These are but a few of the national and global issues which demand the historic history of African American leadership, vision, and action. And these are the historic reasons that give me such pride and hope in receiving this award from the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. Thank you.
All Congressional Black Caucus spouses, please report backstage.
So who else is extraordinarily proud to be here at this time right now? A tremendous, tremendous time. I'd like to take, if you'll allow me, a moment to acknowledge some special guests that we have here tonight, very close to me, who've made quite a journey to be here. For three of them, it's their first trip outside of their home country, Sierra Leone, West Africa. They are representatives of Pinguia Chiefdom in the remote eastern part of Kailaun District, Sierra Leone. They are former District Councilor Lucy Jabila. Would you stand, please, Councilman Lucy, Councilor Lucy, who was chosen by the women of Pinguia to represent them on this trip to the United States of America. Also, current District Councilor Daniel Manger, Chief Patrick Dauda Koa, and Chief Tamba Lahai. Now, the President mentioned hard work. I want to tell you a little something about hard work. These people have come here looking for partnership with America. They have great potential in their area, and they need just a little bit of help from us to achieve that potential. They're not asking for charity, however, they're asking for partnership. You see, the longest leg of their journey back home Monday will not be the flight from DC to London or the flight from London to Freetown, Sierra Leone, but rather the drive from Freetown to their home chiefdom, Pinguia. Those 269 miles will take them 1 full day by car to traverse if they push it. The last 27 miles will take them 3.5 to 4 hours in good weather. Their entire chiefdom was destroyed during the recent Civil War. Not one house was left standing. They experienced the highest infant mortality rate in the world. 1 in 5 children dies by the time he's 5 years old. Women die in childbirth in disproportionate numbers. Security is not what it should be because of the difficulty of policing the area, and they're constrained in converting their abundant mineral and agricultural resources into abundant hard currency because they can't get easily to markets. But we can help them. But as well, they can help us. Because if we go about rehabilitating that road, we can do it with American machinery. We can open up the agricultural potential to American machinery as well. And once they build up some disposable income, what's stopping them from purchasing all manner of other American goods and services? Nothing but our disengagement. So I welcome them here because we'd like to help them. And I've been working with them through a foundation called Taya Peace Foundation. And so I appreciate your time tonight and welcoming them here, and I appreciate your listening. And by the way, if any of you come from a rice-producing region of the South, it's highly likely that you can trace your ancestral path back to Sierra Leone because the Mende and Mandingo and Limba and Temni and Kissi people there were brought here during the state slave trade, not randomly, but because of their rice-producing expertise. At one point, Sierra Leone produced more rice than the United States of America, and we'd like to help them achieve that potential again. They have much to offer. Thank you for welcoming them, and thank you for listening. And you can visit tayapeace.org to learn more about how you can help. That's Taya, T-A-I-A. It's Mende for Black, tayapeace.org. Thank you. And now, please welcome the third most powerful member of the United States House of Representatives, which means he's considerably powerful than myself, House Majority Whip, the Honorable James Clyburn from South Carolina.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I am pleased to introduce and present a proud American, Dr. Susan Elizabeth Rice. She is an outstanding scholar, a standout athlete, a daughter, a mother, a wife, an American foreign policy expert, a good friend, and the United States Ambassador to the United Nations. Ambassador Rice is a proven leader and principled diplomat. Her credentials read Senior Foreign Policy Advisor to Senator Obama, Senior Fellow in foreign policy, global economy, and economic development at the Brookings Institute, Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs during the Clinton administration, Senior Advisor for the National Security Affairs to the Kerry Edwards Campaign, Managing Director and Principal of IntelliBridge International, and Management Consultant, McKinsey & Company. Dr. Rice is the third female ambassador to the United Nations and the first African-American woman to hold the position. A Rhodes Scholar trained for greatness, Ambassador Rice has an innate ability to visualize the entire landscape, analyze the opponent, and recognize openings. She is slow to judgment, yet deliberate in action. Her methodical approach to global relations has served to broker peace in contentious settings, to quell brewing anxieties among various peoples around the world, and is helping to restore the moral authority of our great country. It is with great pleasure that I present the recipient of the 2009 Charles C. Diggs Award for Foreign Service to Dr. Susan Elizabeth Rice. Dr. Rice.